Her body was found the next morning in a parking lot in Glenarden, Maryland. She had been beaten, raped, and murdered. The FBI called it a brutal murder. No suspect was identified, and for the next 46 years, the man responsible lived his life, freely, quietly, in a house in North Carolina, while Kathryn's family waited for answers that never came. Until March of 2025, when investigators knocked on the door of an 82-year-old man named Rodger Zodas Brown and placed him under arrest for a murder he thought he had escaped forever. If you are new to this channel and you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about cold cases that were finally cracked open, about victims who waited decades for justice, about the families who never stopped hoping, please subscribe right now. Hit that button and join this community. We cover these stories every single week.
Who was Kathryn Donohue? Kathryn Donohue was 31 years old in the winter of 1979. She lived in Arlington, Virginia, just across the border from Washington, D.C. She worked as a secretary, the kind of job that requires reliability, punctuality, and a steady presence. And by all accounts, that's exactly who she was. A steady, reliable, present person in the lives of those around her. Arlington in the late 1970s was a working-class suburb, the kind of place where government workers, secretaries, contractors, and young families built ordinary lives in modest apartments and small homes. The DC metro area had its share of crime, as any major city does, but for most people living and working there, violence wasn't something they expected to touch their lives. On the evening of March 3rd, 1979, Kathryn did what many coworkers do after a long week. She went out to dinner with the people she worked alongside every day. It was a simple evening. Food, conversation,
The discovery. The following morning, a citizen walking through a parking lot in the 8400 block of Hamlin Street in Glenarden, Maryland, came across something that stopped them cold. A woman's body lying in the open in a parking lot in broad daylight. They called police immediately. When officers arrived, they found Kathryn Donohue. She was 31 years old. She had been beaten, raped, and killed. The FBI would later describe what was done to her as a brutal murder, language that law enforcement typically uses carefully and only when the facts demanded. Glenarden is a small city in Prince George's County, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. It sits less than 30 minutes from Arlington, Virginia, where Kathryn lived and worked. She hadn't traveled far from her world that night, but somewhere between leaving her colleagues and getting home, her path had crossed with someone.
The investigation goes cold. Despite the physical evidence, despite the investigation, despite detectives working the case in those early weeks and months, no suspect was ever identified. There were no witnesses who could place anyone with Kathryn that night. There was no name that rose to the surface. The man who killed her had left DNA behind. But in 1979, that DNA couldn't yet be run against a national database, matched to a profile, or traced to a person through their relatives. The science that would eventually solve this case simply didn't exist yet. The case went cold. For Kathryn's family, this was the beginning of a different kind of suffering, the suffering of not knowing. There was no trial, no conviction, no name to attach to what had happened. Just an open case file and a family left to grieve without any answers. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Years turned into decades. Meanwhile, the man who left his DNA at that crime scene in 1979, the cold case unit reopens everything. In late 2024, the Prince George's County Police Department's cold case unit decided to give Kathryn Donohue's case another look. This was not unusual. Cold case units across the country routinely revisit old files as technology improves, and Prince George's County had been working through its backlog of unresolved cases with fresh eyes and modern tools. The unit secured a grant specifically to fund forensic reanalysis. This is important. It means that solving a case like Kathryn's required not just willpower, but resources.
Somebody had to fund the laboratory work, the DNA processing, the genealogical research. The grant made it possible. The evidence collected from the crime scene in 1979 was sent to Othram, a specialized forensic laboratory based in Texas that focuses exclusively on genetic genealogy and genome sequencing for law enforcement purposes. Othram's work is specifically designed for cases like this one: old evidence, degraded samples, complex DNA profiles that conventional testing can't resolve. Their scientists extracted DNA from the preserved evidence and developed what they called a comprehensive genetic profile.
The arrest. Rodger Zodas Brown was 82 years old and living quietly in Pinehurst, North Carolina, when investigators from Prince George's County came for him. On March 11, 2025, officers from the Moore County Sheriff's Office and agents from the FBI arrested Brown at his home. Police described his reaction as solemn and cold. He showed no emotion, no surprise, no denial, just silence, as investigators placed him under arrest for a murder he had committed 46 years earlier, when he was a 36-year-old man living in Prince George's County, Maryland. He was charged with first-degree murder, rape, and related offenses. He was held in North Carolina pending extradition back to Maryland, where the case would be prosecuted by the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office. The arrest was announced publicly on March 18, 2025, at a press conference held by the Prince George's County Police Department. FBI Special Agent in Charge Bill Del Bagno stood at the podium and described what had been done to Kathryn Donohue as a brutal murder. He spoke about the work of the Cold Case Unit. He spoke about Othram's forensic analysis. And he made clear that the passage of time, 46 years of it, had not protected Rodger Zodas Brown from accountability. The family speaks. For Kathryn Donohue's family, the arrest came after 46 years of waiting. In a statement released by police, her family thanked the investigators who never let the case die. They praised what they called the relentless pursuit of truth, a phrase that carries enormous weight when it comes from people who spent almost 5 decades not knowing. They said that the arrest had finally given them a sense of closure they never thought possible after all this time. Think about what that means. 46 years. An entire lifetime for some people. Children who were born after Kathryn died have grown up, had children of their own, and watched those children grow. All in the time that passed between her murder and the moment investigators finally knocked on Rodger Zodas Brown's door in North Carolina. Her family also said something that stays with you, that this case is a reminder that investigators will never give up seeking the truth, no matter how much.
Kathryn Donohue was 31 years old. She worked hard, she spent time with her coworkers, and she went out to dinner on a March evening in 1979. She never made it home. And for 46 years, the man police say is responsible for her death lived freely, moving away, growing old, settling into a quiet retirement in North Carolina, while her family waited and wondered. In March of 2025, that ended. An 82-year-old man sat in silence as investigators placed handcuffs on his wrists. 4.5 decades after Kathryn was taken from the people who loved her. DNA doesn't forget. Time doesn't erase it. And the people who work cold cases, the detectives, the forensic scientists, the genealogists tracing family trees through generations, they don't stop either.